Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Post Race Reddit, post the Goodyear 400, the Cup Series at Darlington Raceway. So, post race Reddit, every single week I go through the NASCAR Reddit page and go to the post race discussion and take a look at some of the comments, and I pick out some of my favorite comments from the post race discussion. If you watch this video and you see that your comment is used in my video and you no longer want one of your comments used in my video, I will essentially check your name and be like, I'm not using this person's Reddit comments anymore. I'm hoping these videos become big enough that way I can do it on my own Reddit page or maybe X page or something along those lines. But for now, I am doing this. So let's get to some of my favorite Reddit comments of the week. All right, what we got here? This one is from Athletic Jorts. Do you want to stick around for a bit, Daryl? No, I don't think I will. From that would be Endgame, I think, Avengers Endgame. Daryl, the comments I saw the most in this post race discussion were about Daryl Waltrip and how much they missed DW, how much they loved hearing his boogity boogity boogity, how much they just loved hearing him in the booth, and there were so many. He was by far the most talked about thing in the post race discussion, and I loved seeing DW in there. And at one point, he was like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna go watch the rest of this race from somewhere else. I'm gonna go down into the infield and hang out. I don't want to be in the." He pretty much said, "I don't want to be in the booth anymore. I'm gonna leave. I'm out." I don't know if he just wanted to go watch the race or if that's what was planned and that was his funny exit or whatever. But I appreciated him in the booth. I liked liked him being on the grid walk. The grid walk felt a little clunky, but it felt clunky because it felt more natural than it usually does. It feels more forced with Mikey at times. With Mikey and DW, it felt like a natural flow walking down the grid, so I liked that. Just like having DW around. I always like having Darrell Waltrip around. He's a legend of the sport, and he's a legend of the booth as well. This one here is from Noah Gregson's Barf Bag, and he's just quoting what Jeff Gluck quoted Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst got spun by Zilich. What the fuck? And then he's told a message. He got relayed. Sorry, he misjudged it. And then Herbst said, "Tell him to go fuck himself." I don't. I don't blame Herbst. I really don't. I really don't blame Herbst. And this comes from a huge Connor Zilich fan. Zilich took out Herbst flat out, and on top of that, Riley Herbst was probably having his best run that he's ever had for 2311 at a non-super speedway or drafting track. I don't like calling it that, but that's what some people call it. For best non-super speedway race for Riley Herbst. He was running 12th at one point. He was running top 15 pretty much the whole entire race up until this moment. So I definitely feel for Riley Herbst, who could have had a career run. This one is from Pat Mal or Mal 8. Reddick just ran down Brad from 9 seconds back, and Fox covered 0 seconds of it. This was a horrible broadcast for Fox. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I think Fox did pretty well in the 500, and I think for the most part, I've seen improvements. Not necessarily from the booth, but just from Fox in general when it comes to production standpoint, when it comes to the commercials, when it comes to the side-by-side opportunities. I have seen an improvement out of Fox this year, but this was probably their worst broadcast of the year. It was completely awful. Mike Joy overall wasn't very good. Kevin Harvick and Clint Boyer were pretty much useless. They weren't very good. This was not probably. It was their worst broadcast of the season so far, and I think that they just weren't. I don't think they were ready they weren't ready for a race like this, even though we knew a race like this was coming. I think they rely too much on the chaos, and if nothing's happening, nothing's happening. They just do a bunch of commercials. They just kind of rely on the chaos, I guess you could say, from other sort of races where it's not necessarily comers and goers. They weren't ready for a comers and goers sort of race because there wasn't a lot of lead changes. I'm going to be honest, there wasn't a lot of lead changes, but if you look through the rest of the field, there was passing all race long, and they were just paying attention to the leader or the first couple of drivers in the field all race long. Fox did horrible from whatever way you look at it for this race. The fourth one I got here is from Negotiation Working 48. The wife asks, "Why is Grinder on your phone?" Mike Joy responds, "I'm a big sandwich guy." Yeah, I think I've heard him say this before, talk about Grinder being what he calls a sandwich. I think I've heard Mike Joy say all this before. And yeah, I personally have never heard. I know it's a term. I've seen it on the internet. I know it's an actual term for like a hoagie or a sub or something like that. But I personally don't know anybody in my life that uses the term grinder for a sub. But I know it is a thing. Yeah, I knew I was going to probably see something like this. There was actually a couple of things about Mike Joy. Mike Joy was talked about quite a bit as well in the post race discussion. This one is from Celtics 1424 Aura Unmatched, and a picture of Hocevar with his cowboy hat. I noticed they even changed his picture to him wearing the cowboy hat, which I found very interesting that they did that. Hocevar is a popular guy, and when you're a popular guy, you're going to get maybe some special treatment. Because, yeah, the fact that he's not wearing like a team hat or a sponsor hat, he's just wearing a cowboy hat. I don't think I've ever seen that. Well, probably back in the day, but not in a long time. Not in a long time for sure. This one here is from Sleepy Rocket 20. The people calling this people calling this boring must have the attention span of a cockroach. Great tire wear, green flag runs, lots of passing. Couldn't agree more. This was a fantastic race. If you were a fan of NASCAR in the early 2000s, even up until the 2010s, I would say you love this sort of racing. I loved this sort of racing. I wish there wasn't the stage cautions. That might be a discussion for another day this week. But I loved the racing that we saw. The racing was phenomenal. A lot of passing, a lot of comers and goers. Tire wear was fantastic. The reason we didn't see a lot of chaos because the teams were prepared for the tire wear. We knew the tire wear was going to happen, so everybody was ready for it, and we just had a fantastic race. And this one here is from Hillby. What a stupid fucking call to not show your pitting. Absolutely not worth the gamble, actually. I assume Hillby here is talking about Christopher Buescher. I would assume he's talking about Chris Buescher here because Chris Buescher on his last pit stop, his last green flag pit stop, looked like he had a chance at actually winning this race potentially. And came down pit lane. He had Tyler Reddick right behind him when he slowed down to come down pit lane. Reddick got into the back of him, but that's because he never put his hand out the window. The spotter of the 17 never went to go tell the 45 or tell anybody else that they're pitting for strategy purposes. That way nobody copies them on strategy, I would guess. And he tries to pull down pit lane and gets completely run over by Reddick. Can't really blame Reddick for it because Buescher didn't let anybody know about that, and Reddick was not right on his ass, but Reddick was close enough where it was going to be really hard for him to avoid Buescher. Reddick went on to actually win the race. Surprisingly, after that, he didn't really have any damage from it. It didn't seem like that Buescher really had too much damage from it either, but it cost him a lot of time because he ended up missing pit road, had to drive around another lap, and he was slow, and eventually came down pit road and lost any opportunity to win. Ended up still getting a top 10 out of it, though. This one is from Sir Billiam Corgan. LOL, the salt is hilarious. Seeing HMS flares whining about somebody else waiting too much with zero irony is a sight to behold. I can't say it better myself because most of the people that are getting really upset about 2311 winning this race and winning 4 out of the first 6 are Hendrick Motorsports fans of probably Jimmy Johnson, who won 5 straight championships and won race after race after race. Jeff Gordon, who was completely dominant in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then, of course, Kyle Larson. When Kyle Larson won his first championship, he kicked all sorts of ass that year. So, yeah, I hear this 100%. And when somebody is completely dominating the sport, whether it's Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Kyle Busch, or Tyler Reddick, if someone's completely dominating and that's not your favorite driver or at least one of your favorite drivers, you're probably going to be upset. It's just how NASCAR works for stuff like this. This one comes from Much Charred 8227. I absolutely love how much 2311 cars are getting under people's skin. It's comedy. And yeah, I was kind of just going into this as well. It's crazy how much it's getting under people's skin. And I don't think it's necessarily because Michael Jordan or it's 2311. I think it's like I just said off that last Reddit comment. I think it's literally if anybody had this dominant of a start of the season, it's just I think it's natural for a lot of NASCAR fans to just dislike that driver. Like I said, it happened with Jimmy Johnson, happened with Jeff Gordon, happened with Kyle Busch. Now it's happening right here with Tyler Reddick because he's won 4 out of the first 6 races, the third time in NASCAR history that's happened. The other 2 times are by, in my opinion, the 2 greatest drivers in NASCAR history, Jeff Gordon and, of course, Dale Earnhardt, the only other 2 drivers to do it. And this is just phenomenal start of the year for 2311, but it's not a surprise that they're getting under people's skin already. And then this one will be the last one, kind of combining a couple of things I talked about earlier from Sinister Owl 43. Pretty wild how DW is completely blowing Clint out of the water in terms of commentary and analysis. I've said it many times. I freaking love Clint Boyer. I think he's a great personality to have part of the sport because he's overall just hilarious. But he is not a good analyst. He's just, I wouldn't say he's not knowledgeable, but he just doesn't know how to compute his words, I guess you could say. It just usually comes out as nonsense from him. I overall find him pretty boring in the booth unless he's jabbing at Harvick or Mike Joy or something. Other than that, I don't really enjoy him in the booth, but I like his personality a lot. Boyer has one of the best personalities in our sport, period. And when he was racing, he was also one of the best personalities in our sport when he was racing. So I would like to see him have a mic in his hand. I just don't know what that's doing. Maybe he can be doing more like podcast sort of stuff, or he could have like his own NASCAR show, something like that. I just don't think Boyer should be in the booth. I really don't. I don't think Boyer should be in the booth anymore. I think Harvick's improved quite a bit, even though Harvick had a really bad weekend. Like Harvick was bad on the Truck Series broadcast, but I wouldn't put that 100% on him. It seemed like everybody was bad in there, and it didn't sound like Harvick was supposed to be play-by-play for the Truck Series race. Sounded like it was supposed to be Logano, and then Harvick ended up eventually becoming the play-by-play guy around halfway through the race, so I'm not going to really get too mad at him about that. But he wasn't good at all at Darlington. It was definitely the worst broadcast for the whole booth, I would say, at Darlington. But Harvick struggled. Boyer was awful. Mike Joy had some decent moments in his commentary, but for the most part, he didn't have a great broadcast either. Just a really, really weak broadcast from Fox. And yeah, DW still got the fastball, I would say. I heard him in a couple of interviews. Of course, he stalls out from time to time. And he has to think for a quick second or two, but he's almost 80 years old. I don't know what you'd really expect. DW is quite old at this point. Other than that, I think DW is still all there, and I could see him back. Obviously, he's not going to go back into the booth. I think he's done, but I think he is capable of probably calling a whole race again as long as you don't have him being the lead guy. I think he can potentially get back in there if he really wanted to. But it seems like since he got out of that booth, wanted to get out of that booth so fast, I think he's very content with his life, which is awesome to see. Darrell Waltrip deserves it. He's done so much for NASCAR his whole entire life, whether as a driver or in the booth. I wanted to have another DW comment in here because this was what people were talking about more than anything, was about Darrell Waltrip and Boogity 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 and him being back in the booth. So good for DW. He's getting all the love that he deserves, because I remember when right before he got out of the booth, everybody was like, oh, he's geezing. We need to get DW out of the booth. He's ruining the NASCAR on Fox booth. There was a lot. I think a lot of people have selective memory and forget that. But yeah, before Waltrip got out of the booth, a lot of people were upset, and a lot of people were, once he got announced that he wasn't going to be back in the booth, a lot of people were actually happy about it and saying, "Oh, good riddance. DW deserves to retire, and he's just not good in the booth anymore." And then today, everybody's like, "Please, DW, don't leave." Sometimes you don't love something when it's gone. And I think I was in the middle. I think I was one of those people that I think DW is ready to retire for sure just because of his age. But I didn't think he lost it all that much. He was always fun in the booth, even in his later years. But I do agree in his later years in the booth, he did lose a little bit of that analysis. But even then, he's still better than what Clint Boyer is giving us on a weekly basis. All right, and that'll do it for this week's edition of Post Race Reddit. Come back next week as we'll have Post Race Reddit, post Martinsville Speedway. But for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.